ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much, Brother Murtaza. It's always a treat, mashallah, when he recites. Can I please get Allah sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad? Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We have a full night planned, inshallah, as we begin. First off, there's no introduction needed for our dear scholar, a scholar who has done a lot for this community and continues to bless us. Today we have a chance to, inshallah, gain more knowledge on a very interesting topic amongst many. So without further ado, as we continue on with tonight's agenda, I would like to invite Maulana Abidi to come up. Thank you, and Allah sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamun alaykum. Alhamdulillah. Before I begin, I would like to invite the panelists, inshallah. They can be here, inshallah, so we can, inshallah, have a better discussion. I would like to invite Brother Adnan as a great member of our community and also his CEO of the company, and also has a lots of financial background, CFO. And also Brother Shan Razvi, Alhamdulillah, and also Ishraq. If you can join me here, so inshallah we can have some discussion. Please recite the salawats. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين. Inshallah, tonight we want to cover some of the topics like crypto, stocks, finance, what is halal, what is haram, should I buy NFTs, should I invest in options should we consider different types of blockchain technology? In general, what is crypto? Is it technology? Is it investment, stocks, or currency? What are the methods of exchange today? What was the method of exchange in the past? And so on and so forth. So I know that as we are moving, everything is changing rapidly. And we are entering in the new eras. And when I see, mashallah, when I open the Q&A from different backgrounds and people, one of the main topic people they're interested in is whether Islamically it's okay to invest in these new initiatives, financial changes. Often people, they think that it's going to be a future, a game changer, and we don't want to be behind from this and want to be up to the speed. Well, we see some of the mujtahideen says, oh, crypto in general is haram to buy, to trade. Some says, no, it's okay. Some says, ihtiyat wajib, not to do. Some says, ihtiyat mustahab. What is the real answer behind that, and so on and so forth. So basically, brothers and sisters, today what we want to talk and discuss in this open discussion is about crypto and some investments and also stocks in general, which has to do with the finance. So in general, about what crypto is and how crypto function, Ishraq will going to give a presentation, and then we're going to have an open discussion. Brother Adnan will cover from financial background. Brother Shan, he's going to focus on the compliances. That's his, mashallah, background. And I'm going to touch from the Islamic point of view, inshallah. The hope that end of today's discussion, at least we can get some good idea about the cryptos and also Islamic concept about this new technology. But Muhammad wali Muhammad salawat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Inshallah, everybody is doing well here. So as Maulana mentioned, tonight's goal here is not to necessarily talk all about crypto or blockchain or anything like that, but rather it's to essentially shed some high-level overview on this topic so that we can get a better Islamic perspective on that, inshallah. So here I'm going to be covering some different topics about cryptocurrencies, the different markets that exist within this system. But before I do that, I want to just give you a quick background about myself so that, inshallah, we can have a better understanding of where I'm coming from. I'm currently a Web3 contributor for Olympus DAO. Olympus DAO is one of the Web3 crypto projects that's focused on building a reserve currency on the blockchain. In addition, I'm also a contributor to Jones DAO and DopeX, which is focused on options, decentralized options trading. And I'm a core developer and engineer focused on that space. Although I'm an engineer, I don't have that much of a finance background, which is why we have Brother Adnan here. Brother Adnan is, mashallah, CFO of a publicly traded company, and he'll be able to answer any finance-related questions. And then we also have Brother Shan Rizvi here, who can answer questions related to regulations as well as security, inshallah. Okay, so I want to first talk about Bitcoin and talk about why Bitcoin has become such a big deal. Currently, actually, before I talk about Bitcoin, I want to just basically iterate the fact that whatever I'm about to say is based on narratives. This isn't necessarily views that's coming from my personal views or views that is coming from any of the panelists here. These are just narratives that exist in the market right now. What people are saying, why people are saying these things. So what people are saying these days, the narrative of Bitcoin right now is that it has become a store of value, very similar to basically gold. If you look at the gold, the premium that you pay on gold, the price of gold is actually like, the actual utility of gold is very, very little compared to the premium you pay for the attributes of gold, correct? There's a lot of different similarities, but Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat. I'm just going to quickly connect my laptop so everybody can see the presentation here. Yeah, it seems like it's taking some time to load, but while that's loading, I'm just going to continue my presentation, inshallah. There's not a whole lot of stuff that I want to show you anyways from the slides, so you're not missing anything out. So essentially, the similarities between gold and Bitcoin is that, Bitcoin and gold, they're both censorship resistant. They're unpegged to any central banks. They're private hard money. They both have limited supply, and they have a very strong history, although obviously gold has a much deeper history than Bitcoin. But in the perspective of digital currencies, obviously Bitcoin has the longest in history. And then they're both globally well recognized, and they both are subject to regulations. So these are just some similarities between it. Also, another property of Bitcoin and gold is that you can actually transfer value from one person to another person, right? It's used as a store of value. The reason why it's called store of value is because you can easily transfer Bitcoin or gold from one person to another person. But a lot of people actually talk about how Bitcoin might be even superior to gold. And this is the narrative that exists in the marketplace right now. And this is, again, not me saying this. This is what people, such as former executives at Goldman Sachs and just like very renowned people all over the world are saying it. Obviously, we have people on the other side as well. But their narrative is that it might be even better than simply gold, because we actually have the known limit, the supply limit, unlike gold, right? Gold, we don't know the actual known quantity. We don't have the supply right off top of our mind, but we have that about Bitcoin, which is 21 million, right? And unlike gold, Bitcoin is extremely, extremely transparent. We can see all the transactions that take place in the blockchain at any given moment. And this is not controlled by any central entity. And it also has digital utility, unlike gold, right? It could be used for payments. You can't take a piece of gold and use it as a payment, but you can do that with Bitcoin. And it's a much easier way to store value. Theoretically speaking, you can actually store $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. And as long as you have the address, the private key memorized, you could literally cross borders with trillions or whatever, any arbitrary amount of Bitcoins without actually seeking any permissions from any central entities or governments, for that matter. And it's a lot more divisible, right? Bitcoin could be divided into like 0.00001 unit, right? Unlike gold, which is a lot more difficult to divide. And it has a property which is like, it's a real free market. If you think about volatility that exists in the cryptocurrency space, if you look at the charts, it's very volatile. And that's because there's no like opening time or closing time. There's no Saturday and Sunday closing times like stocks. It's extremely, extremely volatile because it could be traded anywhere in the world at any given moment, right? And so that actually might be a feature and not a bug. Okay, so that's about Bitcoin. I don't want to focus too much on Bitcoin. I want to get to altcoins here. Altcoins, examples of altcoins are Dogecoins. Then you have Bitcoin Cash, Cardano, and Shiba Inu, and a few other tokens, which the narrative is that they're either copycats or they're meant for memes. And in cases such as Cardano, even though the technology seems to be interesting, there's very few users that actually use Cardano, for example, right? And so this is about altcoins. And then we have privacy coins, such as Monero, Zcash, Oasis Network, Secret Network. And the idea of privacy coins is that unlike Bitcoin, which is extremely transparent when it comes to all the transactions that take place from one address to another address, protocols such as Zcash essentially use different technologies to mask a lot of sensitive data. And that's what these privacy coins are based off of. And then you have stable coins, such as UST, USDT, you have DAI, you have MakerDAO and whatnot. And the goal of stable coins is to peg a token to a US dollar, so 1 for 1. In some cases, these stable coins lose peg. So for example, in the case of USDC, there's a time where it lost peg severely, right? So it's not always completely pegged 100%. And then you have coins such as Ethereum, Solana, you have Polkadot, you have Polygon, you have Binance. These are tokens that support the global computer, if you will. What I mean by global computer is that imagine you have a computer that is distributed across the world with the same state that's updated and maintained all throughout, right? A better analogy would be, imagine there's a hard drive that every single computer has, and it updates the state of the hard drive, and every time the state is updated, that is synced with all the other computers in the world. And so that's why it's called a global computer. And it could also make, mashallah, it could also basically make different computations, right? And that's what these projects such as Ethereum and Solana are based off of. The idea that you could have a global computer that updates state, and every node in the network, if you will, is connected to that state, and they get updated information on every transaction. These type of cryptocurrencies, such as Ethereum, are better known as digital oil. So whereas Bitcoin was known as digital gold, Ethereum is now known as oil. The reason why it's known as oil is because every time you make a transaction, whenever you're interacting with the Ethereum ecosystem, you have to provide it with Ethereum, which a thing called Ether. So essentially you have to give it Ether, and that's how it runs the computer. That's how it runs the program on this global computer. Okay. So just a quick summary of why Ethereum and Solana and all these different blockchains actually matter. The narrative is that up until now, we had a handful of providers such as Amazon Web Services, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud, Microsoft Azure. And these handful of providers basically empower the entire economy at this point. One of the companies that I used to work for that everybody here is familiar with, DoorDash, for example, our entire servers and services ran on top of AWS. But there's a problem with AWS. The problem with AWS is that it's centralized. It's under the censorship of the US government. The US government can shut down whatever applications that run on top of AWS. And there's all types of problems that arise when it comes to using AWS or Google Cloud or any of these services, right? But the main problem with all of that is that none of them is actually decentralized. So if you are a person, say in India or a different country, then you don't have the same level of access that people here have access to, just because of different geographic locations, right? There's a lot of limitations when it comes to these services. And so what Ethereum and Ethereum blockchains are doing here is that they're replacing AWS, they're replacing Microsoft Azure in a way where they basically became the platform of computation, and all the applications that live on top of, for example, Ethereum, could enjoy the benefits unanimously without any geography or any other parameters into account. So you could literally be someone living in a remote village in India. As long as you have a few Ethereums, it could even be a fraction of Ethereum, you could deploy an application on top of Ethereum, and there you go. All of a sudden you made an app. There's a very famous protocol that's called Rari Capital, and I want you guys to look it up whenever you guys have a chance when you go home. Rari Capital is this app that is made by high school kids. And right now, there's over $1 billion of funds locked in this decentralized app that sits on top of Ethereum. I mean, just think about it. There's over $1 billion of assets that sit on top of Rari Capital, which is created by a bunch of high school kids. There's another app called Instant App. Instant App is this app that was made by villagers in India. And this app has, again, another example of an app that has over $1 billion of value locked in. And none of these high school kids had to interact with the government authorities to do what they were doing. All they had to do is have some Ether and have a little bit of coding skills that they learned on YouTube and Coursera maybe, or some other platforms, in many cases for free. And they had to just interact with this open platform to deploy whatever application that they had to deploy. And then it's out there on the internet, essentially. And what's neat about this is that nobody can stop it, right? Nobody in the world can actually stop these kids from deploying applications. Because how can you stop it? The only way you can actually stop these apps is if you stop Ethereum. And in order to stop Ethereum, you have to have over 51% of all Ethereum supply. And that's a lot of money. If the market cap of Ethereum right now is, say, $300 billion, you have to have over $100 billion. A single entity has to have over $100 billion worth of Ether accumulated, and then somehow try to stop it with a 51% attack. And even then, there's mechanisms in place which don't allow any central party to stop that. This is a very, very important concept if you think about it, right? Because now you have a completely new way of building apps that don't need permission from service providers like AWS or a government entity, right? And that's how it should be, according to the narrative. That's how it should be, because that's how the internet was born, right? Okay, so just a few more minutes. The future, it seems, according to this narrative, is that everything that is built on Web 2.0, the AWSs of the world, the Microsoft Azures of this world, everything that is built on top of these service providers will eventually be built on Web3 services like Ethereum, for example, right? And not only will they be a lot more censorship resistant and decentralized, but they'll be a lot more faster. Even though right now, today, Ethereum is running very slowly, because of the technology that's constantly evolving, it's projected to actually be a lot faster than AWS. And we're not talking about a decade from now. We're not talking about half a decade from now. We're talking about 2 to 3 years from now. So 2 to 3 years from now, don't be surprised if you see a lot of these applications on top of these blockchain solutions that run as fast, if not faster, than a lot of these centralized providers. Okay. So within Ethereum and Solana and other blockchain ecosystems, we have 3 main application categories. So I mentioned about how you can deploy applications on top of these different blockchains, right? The first one is called DeFi, or decentralized finance. The second one is NFTs, and the third one is DAOs. And I'll just briefly cover one by one. Within DeFi, which is decentralized finance, what they're trying to do is build all these different applications that exist in traditional finance and make it more decentralized. The beginning of this is token swapping. So let's say you want to swap from Ethereum, like you have Ether, you want to swap from Ether to Bitcoin. One of the applications that allow you to do that is Uniswap, which is a completely decentralized application that lives on top of Ethereum. It allows you to swap from token to other tokens, much like an exchange like Coinbase. Imagine a decentralized version of Coinbase. That's already there. It's pretty massive. There's billions of dollars locked in, and it's a massive, massive protocol. Another example of token swapping is called Sushi Swap or Curve. And then you have another type of applications for decentralized finance, such as synthetic assets or synthetic tokens. Imagine you have a token called MABNB, which is basically a token that is pegged to the stock price of Airbnb. And with enough liquidity, which there's already a bunch of liquidity in the Mirror protocol, you can now buy a synthetic Airbnb stock from anywhere in the world at any given time. You don't need to wait for opening of the market or closing the market. You don't have to worry about, the market closes at 3 p.m., none of that. Or you can even buy a synthetic S&P 500 token, which is pegged to S&P 500. It's all synthetic. Or Google stocks, or any other commodities or anything like that. Another example of a DeFi project would be over-collateralized borrowing and lending. So say you have a bunch of Ethereum, and you want to borrow US dollars against your Ethereum. You can do that right now in a very decentralized manner. All you have to do is go to a website, for example, like Aave or Compound, connect your private key to this website, and then you can instantly gain access to these financial services that allow you to borrow and lend. Another example is stablecoins, decentralized stablecoins. Right now, USDC and USDT are the two biggest stablecoins on the world, but these stable tokens are actually held by reserves that are more centralized, right? Now there's an initiative to make stablecoins that are completely decentralized, that even the US government basically has no control over. And examples of that would be Frax, MakerDAO, and Fi. Okay, so those are just a few examples of what's already happening today in decentralized finance. And now I want to briefly talk about NFTs. NFTs is a very fancy way of saying that you have ownership, a true ownership of a digital asset. And that digital asset could be anything, such as a piece of music file, or it could be a concert ticket, or it could be an artwork, anything that could live on the digital world. Imagine you have true ownership of that, and basically that's what NFTs are. And that's another application of blockchain technology applications. And then finally, I want to talk about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. In order to facilitate the coordination of all these different projects that I just mentioned, so for example, I talked about Rari Capital, or I talked about Instadap. Instadap is this decentralized application that was started by a bunch of villagers in India, which has over $500 million to $1 billion value locked in with no permissions asked. Now the question is, how do these kids actually coordinate these projects? How are they able to achieve such massive returns and such massive goals? Well, the way they did that is by forming this thing called DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. Essentially, that's a fancy way of saying you have a bunch of tokens. As long as you have a bunch of tokens, you are now part of this club and you can be a contributor of this club. End of the story. So you can do things like voting on different proposals. So let's say that in the case of Instadap, let's say Instadap wants to do XYZ. Well, they have a voting process for that. As long as you have certain tokens, Instadap tokens, you can start voting on certain key issues for Instadap projects, right? This is how today DAOs are are structured is they issue these tokens, and as long as you have these tokens, you now are eligible to essentially vote on key proposals, and you could be a governor of this DAO and whatever else you want to do. They also hire developers, they hire marketers, and they're hiring all kinds of people all around the world. And what's neat about this is that they pay them directly in stable coins like USDC, USDT, DAI, whatever, in their private addresses. So today, I'm not talking about fairy tales here. Today, you could be sitting anywhere in the world. You could be sitting in Antarctica with no permissions asked, and you could be working for a DAO, right, such as InstaDApp or Rari Capital or MakerDAO, and you could be paid straight to your private Ethereum key. I mean, this is such a powerful idea, and this is why the narrative is that DAOs and blockchain and all of that is the future. It's already happening here. Okay, and lastly, before I wrap it up, I want to just talk about why do we need this technology, right? Like, why blockchain? Why is it such a big deal? Well, I just talked about one important reason, which is censorship resistant. We're not here trying, these projects are not here trying to be involved in criminal activities where they want to be masked from the government, although there are many, many such entities that do exist, but that's true with every new technology, right? But the important reason why it needs to be censorship resistant is because that's the original promise of the internet. The internet promised originally that everything will be censorship resistant. Unfortunately, a handful of corporations such as Google, Facebook, and Microsoft now have control over the entire internet. So this is a new movement that is supported, by the way, by many US regulators, Brother Sean will talk about this, as well as many technologists that work in companies like Google, right? And so this is a very important movement that's taking place right now. Also, these apps are like Lego pieces, right? In a traditional architecture, in order for you to communicate with a different server, you have to have a team of people that talk to the other company. For example, you want to have access to some API from a different company. You have to set up a meeting with that other company. You have to get a demo. Some salespeople pitch you on the idea, and then finally you close a deal, and then you have access to the API. And even then, you have to pay a significant amount. Whereas here in the blockchain world, all these apps exist and they float around. It's like Lego pieces. You can just grab one piece, plug it into another piece, and you can create a massive project out of it. And it's permissionless, and it's extremely fast. It's not fast today, but it's going to be much, much fast later, inshallah. Okay, so this is just the brief introduction, high-level overview of blockchains and cryptocurrencies and different types of cryptocurrencies. And now I'm going to ask Brother Sean to talk about regulations that exist today in the US government, particularly regarding cryptocurrencies, and B, some security things that you should keep in mind with that, inshallah. But Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat.
Well, first off, thank you very much. That was a really well done presentation. Just to kind of give some context, it's a very, it can say complex field, but it's not as complex as we think it is. MashaAllah, there are high school students, middle school students who are doing much better and already starting to implement a lot of these programs. In fact, this is the future, and this is why I commend Brother Ishraq for putting together this panel, because there's some key concepts here that we want to cover. So before I go into the actual topic that Brother Ishraq asked me, I want to help you envision something. If you look at why it's called Web 3, back in the 1990s, think about where many of us were, what we were doing, how we imagined the world, and how different it was from where we are today. At that time, you might have heard for the first time .com, or the internet, or basic communication. Did many of us believe where it would go and how it would be? Would many of us believe today that we are on internet almost every second of our lives at some point? That concept of internet is called Web 1. Why? Because you were able to go onto a website and read information. In fact, from an Islamic perspective, it's the first time that we had access to our marja'iyah in such an easy and fast way, no matter what corner of the world you were. That was called Web.1 because I could read information, and that alone changed the world. Web 2 came along in the 2000s, and many of us complain about our children being on social media, but we don't realize that that actually changed the world as well, because for the first time, not only can we consume content, we're now creating content. We're posting information on Twitter and Facebook, and that started to change the world that we talk to each other. We can talk to family across the world and send money. We can interact and create businesses and flights, and everything about how you did business just over 20 years ago completely changed. We're now at the cusp of Web 3. What is Web 3? As Brother Ishraq so eloquently put it, is for the first time in your life, the new internet is going to involve ownership. You're going to have ownership on the internet, and these are just many tools and ways that you're going to have that ownership. So that's a concept that I want us to understand. My background is, prior to being here in California, I worked for the Big Four Consulting, focused on cybersecurity and privacy for over 7 years. And in fact, one of the biggest things that I'm most excited about blockchain is privacy and security, which we'll talk about. Now, I'm directly involved in the metaverse, which is another big name that, big word that everyone uses. But what does that actually mean? Well, to simplify it, it means that we're all going to be interacting in another form of communication directly. And we're going to be using tools such as blockchain, such as cryptocurrencies, to be able to exchange with each other. I also do, on the side, I also do mining cryptocurrencies, which many of us might not know, but inshallah we'll talk about that. So specifically to the question on regulation, what does it actually mean and what's the benefit of regulation? So cryptocurrencies was initially created because of trying to avoid a centralized regulated market. It was developed in something called the dark web. So it had initially a bad rap, but it wasn't created for bad purposes at all. In fact, a lot of transactions that we try to do, a lot of bureaucracy that you face in your day-to-day life and work, even imagine when you try to get your social security number or pay your taxes, imagine all the lines you have to face and all the paperwork that you have to face. There were folks who wanted to essentially create an idea where I can be able to create transparency. That's the first concept I want everyone to understand. Back in the day, Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Salawat ala Muhammad, when he would go to trade, every single trade that he would make, he would record on a ledger, on a document where he would tell you how much of one product he had and one product was sold. This was recorded on a ledger. This ledger he would use to validate, one, transparency and honesty amongst the fellows that he traded with. And when he would come back, it had a full ledger. The reason why that was so important is because he wanted to enforce honesty amongst his trades and to show the value that every single deal was done with complete understanding of what was done. That's what the blockchain tries to achieve. It's essentially encryption. It's a way of protecting pieces of information. So if me and Brother Ishraq make a trade tomorrow, inshallah, everything is recorded, and that record cannot be altered or changed. And it's recorded on a continuous chain. So the first thing is it ensures transparency between us. Imagine now, for the first time, if we go and actually buy food that's halal, and we go to the market, and as we were advised in the sunnah that we should know where our food comes from, now we can actually quickly, on one click of a button, know exactly where that food came from, and it wasn't tampered, because it's encrypted and it's transparent. So the potential from an Islamic perspective is ginormous. But there's also, of course, places that we have to watch out for. Regulation in this space is not there. Countries don't know how to understand what's going on. And in fact, there's been a lot of benefits because folks who are trying to send money home and are facing sanctions and bureaucracies can be able to do things that they weren't doing before. And as governments try to get around certain regulations, it's starting to lead to some questions. But the reality is that the market itself, when we talk about crypto, when we talk about blockchain, relatively is not centralized. It's not controlled by a central entity. The current rules as we know it don't apply, which allow a lot of possible innovations, such as children in India in a village being able to enter the market right now. In fact, there's nothing stopping your children from learning Solidity or any other key language in the 9th grade and creating a DAO, trading cryptocurrency, starting mining like I do. And in fact, the reason why I started mining was because I was like, if I'm gonna buy a PC for $2,000, I know for half the day I'm not using it because I'm on my work laptop. Why don't I use my laptop, my computer, to generate for me coins? So this concept that we're trying to get to is an important concept, but there's also a lot of mystification that's happened that has stopped Muslims from leading this new world that can possibly come. And this is one thing I want to challenge you with tonight, is that if you're going to take anything, why is it that we're holding back? This is a chance for us to finally change the narrative and lead this new edge as Muslims, as engineers, as educated folks, and as folks who have children who are going to learn this technology one way or another. What can we do in this space? From a security perspective, and one last thing I'll change before I pass it on, there's a security principle called non-repudiation. What does that mean? When I'm doing a security assessment on a company, and for example, I want to ensure that something is safe. Oftentimes people think safety is keeping someone out. But say me and Brother Ishraq have access to one email account. That email account is used to do something not good. But there's no log of who has access to that email account. So I sent out a really bad email, and I blame Brother Ishraq, God forbid. How can he deny that? He can't. What blockchain does from a security perspective is not only ensure that transparency, but it eliminates the concept of repudiation, which means for the first time as well, you cannot deny the transactions. So although it's not regulated, think about the potential of how much can be done, because for the first time, your information is consistent and it can be viewed. And inshallah, we'll talk more about that with your Q&A. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Brothers and sisters, before we move on, I would like to make sure that all of us were on the same page. Although lots of good painting and picture about crypto, Web3, 8.0.2 and so on and so forth, I don't want to see that the takeaway point is, oh, this is wow, the future, and let's go jump in to mine these types of cryptos and this halal and all of that. I'm going to talk and discuss about that. Just I want to make sure that we are in the same page, what we are talking about. And as Brother Ishraq, my son Ishraq, he said, it's the narratives, and if I want to bring some other people, those who are opposing 100% about this, you will see that also. Again, we don't want to conclude yet. Please bear with us for a few more minutes, inshallah. And inshallah, we can have a better idea. So I would like to ask Brother Adnan, he can also give a few minute talk from his point of view about the new changes happening and how that impact in the financial field.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks very much for the time and opportunity here. So what's amazing to me whenever you go to events like this is the underlying principles of our religion are what all these things are trying to solve. The reason why some of these things exist is to identify the source of truth, or to identify the ownership, or to identify or to carry through the authenticity in a transaction. Somebody reminded me, I think last week I was having a conversation with them. Sure. Is this better? Yeah. So somebody reminded me, I think on Friday I was talking to them, and they reminded me, yes, Harvard, when it was starting, it was looking for a logo, and what better logo than to say Veritas? I mean, if you look at the Latin meaning of the word, it's truth. And that is the basis of our religion, that is the basis of our transactions. I can't tell you how many times I've had transactions in the business world with people where fine, there are legal contracts, but the trust, when it's there, surpasses anything else. Any legal contract can be broken, but trust is kind of the number one thing we're all trying to solve. Let me touch on kind of a couple of areas in the traditional world of finance, but in order to do that, I'll just give you a quick background. So I'm an engineer like a lot of us here, and then I switched over to the investment banking side of the world. I worked in technology mergers and acquisitions at Goldman Sachs and a few other places, and then moved over to the corporate world, and now I'm CFO at a local public tech company. I think there are three areas when you look at different companies and what they do, right? That blockchain transactions and the authenticity they bring could be very relevant. For example, what does a company do? First of all, people are out there selling, but how you memorialize that is with a contract in place, right? You're selling some product or services, and you're putting a legal document or a contract in place in order to do that. A lot of times, a lot of legal departments within companies exist to exchange the documentation, to identify that the document that's being sent over, signed by the other party, is indeed the version that I sent over for signature. A lot of people are trying to do that with DocuSign these days and say, oh, I will only send you, I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced it. You will get a PDF version as a DocuSign as a way to prevent the change at your end from happening. But that's just one small step. So a lot of the work that happens is to verify the authenticity of what's being signed. Blockchain could be one way to alleviate the pains and the risks that exist in exchange of those contracts. These could be contracts with your customers, contracts with your suppliers, to say, yes, indeed, there is a document, this is the chain that it traveled through, and it's verified. That's just one example. And that's on the contracting side. Then if you think about money flows within the companies, there are two other pieces of it, right? There's the money that comes in, which is accounts receivable, and then there's the money that the companies are paying out, which is accounts payable. There's a lot of fraud that happens even in those areas. You know, banking information can be wrong. You know, some people will come in and do some phishing. Some transaction will go to the wrong source. Some money will come from the wrong source. You will get a bill that somebody says it's what you owe or your company owes. Some department might somewhere pay it. Some payments might be late. So to verify, again, it goes back to Veritas. It goes back to identifying the source of truth. And I think there's a lot of interesting applications from the blockchain world when we look at the traditional world of finance, and we are way in the early stages. I can tell you the number of companies that I come across, that I see, that are using blockchain technology is still quite few. It's still early days. But I do think there's a lot of possibilities to apply that to the contracting, to the payments receiving, and to the payments payable part of the world. But excited to see all that. You know, obviously, Brother Ishaq is the expert, and I look forward to learning more from him as well. But happy to be here.
Okay. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat. Okay, so let me give you a bigger picture. So inshallah, we can be on the same page. Brothers and sisters, now I want to talk from Islamic point of view before we open for Q&A. You can see that some people, they quoted some of the fatwa from Ayatollah Sistani that in general, crypto is not aligned with Islamic values. Therefore, ihtiyat wajib is not to enter. Some other mujtahideen, like Ayatollah Safi Gulpagani, he says straightforward haram. Some mujtahideen says it's not a problem as long as urfan, or if it's commonly accepted among the people, it's okay. Ayatollah Khamenei and others, they have with conditions. This is a background of it. Please don't obsess with these types of fatwa, because none of these fatwa are accurate. Because the fatwa in general is the answer of what you ask. That could be, for example, I can go, or you can go, for example, Brother Aslam can ask for Ayatollah Sistani that we have a corrupted mullah in San Jose, and he drinks and he doesn't respect anything. Can I pray on his behalf? Obviously, he's going to get no, it's haram. With that, anyone who is leading a Jamaat prayer in SABA, is haram to pray on his behalf? No, that's not the case. The fatwa is the answer of what you ask the question. Please understand that it's very important that fatwa is what you give the information, and based on that information, what you get the answer, that's the fatwa. Therefore, if you give wrong information or incomplete information or misleading information or one-sided information, you're going to get the answer for that. It's clear? So now, take one step back. Brothers and sisters, 1,000 or 2,000 years back, what was the method of exchange, goods to goods, right? I have sheeps, Brother Adnan has calf, Brother Shan has camel, Ishraq has some wheat, chicken. I need wheat and chicken. I give some sheep and get some chicken and wheat. Same thing. He needs wheat, Brother Adnan gives the calf, and Brother Shan gives the camel and whatnot, right? Goods to goods. Then the method of exchange for scalability was for long period of time gold and silver, right? Yeah, grains. No, the grains is part of goods, right? Goods and grains is part of that. So for a long time, it was gold and silver. And then when first time currency came, you can see the fatwa of the Mujtahideen back then, 200 plus years back. It was amazing because it was a new concept that the paper can weight something at 10, for example, gold coin in one single paper. Why I have to give that? Gold coin is something tangible, and so on and so forth. Then for last 200 years, people, they're used to it with this currency. Today, what is the method of exchange? Even this currency right now is sitting on the algorithm. Lots of that. So I don't want to go in detail about that. Just I'm giving you some of the background. What does that mean is when any new initiative comes, it's a lots of speculations. Now about crypto, these are the four main things. First, whether crypto is real or a fake, a mirage. Second, this crypto is gambling or not. Third, crypto is a currency, method of payment or not. And fourth, this crypto has any future to it or not. If you go and talk to Shan, Ishraq, they will say that definitely that's the future. If you talk to those who are conservative people like Brother Adnan, we don't know yet. If you talk to other people, maybe Brother Ali Jan says, not at all, it's a mirage, right? So you have these types of bipolar opinions or narratives. So now, the first one, whether this crypto is real. When you say real, three things: whether it is a investment, or it's a technology, or it's a mix of investment and technology. You can say that it's part of Web3 and part of the new technology, but this technology comes with lots of investments. And within that, as you can see that we have, for example, first Bitcoin, then ETH, and then alts, and then DeFi, then, the NFTs, and so on and so forth, and the stable coins, and all of those, different types of blockchains, which Ishraq also mentioned. So the answer to that is not clear that it's only technology or a mix of technology and investment and also a few other things. So based on that, brothers and sisters, all the fatwa which was asked by the Mujtahideen, I was looking, and it was not based on the complete informations. it was either partial information or misleading informations. I can give you one simple example so we can be in same page. The same Ayatollah Gulpagani who stayed for, Ayatollah Safi Gulpagani said that it's haram, although Ayatollah Safi Gulpagani is no longer, he died a couple of years back. So this year, may Allah bless his soul and include the Shuhada of Karbala. I have a very important experience with Ayatollah Muhammad Rida Gulpagani. In 1984, first year of Hausa, although maybe some of our brothers, they want to calculate my age, how old I am. Maybe at that time I was a couple of months, don't worry about that. So what happened is 1984, once I entered to Hausa, at that time the computer was kind of new concept, the Web 1, what brother Sean mentioned. I was there with Ayatollah Gulpagani's office and sitting and few other, mashallah, great scholars and so on and so forth. They said that there is a delegation from Tehran University and they want to give you some exciting news about the technology. I said, okay, great. And out of curiosity, I sat there. I want to know what is going on. When I sat there, they brought a big old type of computer lab, the computer desktop, and it took like maybe 10-15 minutes to open that, and the first picture came is La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, kind of pronos. So what? And then the 2-3 professors from Tehran University, they said, Hajaga, this is the future. This is how our children will going to be trapped. And this is what Web 1 or technology or computer. Obviously, he has to give the fatwa what? Haram to use, right? After a couple of years, it was clear that that's not the case. Same Ayatollah Gulpagani, what he did is he ordered to have the first Noor software, which is right now leading software for lots of ahadith, Quran, history, and Islamic teachings. Right? Those who are aware about soft Noor, is amazing, right? So that's how you can see the changes. So what I want to say, brothers and sisters, these fatwa are based on incomplete information. What me and you we have to see is these 4 points. 1, is it gambling or not? Maisar. If it's a gambling, it's haram, no doubt about that. That's why if you don't know about ins and out and just you want to invest in even stock market, where Brother Adnan can say stock market is not a problem, all the mujtahideen says halal, but if you go and you're kind of buying these stocks or options like gambling, it's haram. Same thing, blockchain, Web3, whatnot. If it has a component of gambling or all of it gambling, it's haram. That's one. Second, it's very important to understand that this is built upon any corruption or dhulm. Majority of the scholars, they emphasized it a lot. And now some of the people, when they ask the question, what they say is, oh, Hajaga, based on our study, if you have a Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatnot, the amount of the electricity we're going to use there is unimaginable and equal to this country, that country, and this built upon the dhulm and oppression. It's haram. That's not as simple as that. You can have the other argument. You can say that, for example, banking system right now, the amount of usage of electricity is surplus, more than the other things. Again, I am not here to say that which argument has a stronger weight or not, but I want to say that, brothers and sisters, if has an element of dhulm on it, be away from that. That's second. The third thing, what you have to see, brothers and sisters, is this is acceptable among the people, has a value to it or not. In order to gauge the value, you have to go to the expert. Seems that right now, the crypto market is close to $1 trillion. Once you have $1 trillion crypto market, you can't say that has no value to it and it's a fake completely, right? So it's very important to understand that we cannot deny that. The fourth one is Islam doesn't give you specific details for every single thing. You need to consider the principles, and based on that principles, you need to draw the conclusion. And that's where mujtahideen are there. I'm sure right now, all the mujtahideen, they're working to understand more about this Web3, blockchain, and it will come soon more clear fatwa. If someone asked me today, I would say that be vigilant, be careful, and be more muhtat about that. But I don't want to say that's completely haram, or I don't want to say that this is no problem, go buy anything. But some of these things, like for example, Bitcoin and the Ethereum, those who bought like when Bitcoin was maybe $300, $400. Right now they're sitting in good asset, 40 plus, right? Maybe tomorrow it going to go down to 30 or 20. Even if it goes to 20, those who bought $1,000, still they are, in plus. But for other people, it's going to be gambling. So that's why it's not black and white. You need to see from different angles to it. Again, we can say for Bitcoin and Ethereum, that's why some of the mujtahideen, they said that these two methods are okay, but some others, like NFTs, majority of the fatwa, you can see towards the NFTs, is either haram or with lots of cautious. Why? Because NFT is different things and has a different value on it, like kind of copyright. Because in Islam, some of the mujtahideen don't believe in copyright to begin with. But some other methods, like for example, which pegged to the dollar, like stable coins and so on and so forth, that is widely used from the other people also. And that's where some fatwa we see is halal is referred to either the stable coins or kind of Bitcoin and Ethereum, not for other types of blockchains. So again, brothers and sisters, if you want to draw the conclusion, it's very difficult. You have to see from a general perspective. But Muhammad Wali, Muhammad Salawat.
So now we're going to open up the panel discussion to Q&A and questions. So please, if you do have questions, please ask now. Brother.
Thank you, brother. The question is, options are haram? I didn't say that options are haram. Options also depend on what type of options, and also should not be based on gambling. Most of these options are based on gambling or just speculations. That has element of gamblings and the haram, but not stable options. Some of the stable options, you can't say that is haram. Any other question, brothers and sisters? Sisters, mashallah, because sisters are the one who are investing, mashallah. Any brothers? Yes, brother.
So the question from the brother is that because cryptocurrencies is not supported by government funding or directly regulated by the government, it can be questionable. Is that right? From a regulatory perspective, I can tell you that some countries have actually made cryptocurrencies part of their general economy. Ecuador or El Salvador have already moved in that direction. Some countries that are heavily sanctioned have also moved in that direction because of economies of scale, how easy it is, and how much better it can be. Unfortunately, there are certain concepts in this world that we can question and discuss as zulm. For example, some countries will never have the same funding or access to the American dollar as other countries. Some countries may never have access to specific currencies because of the difficulty to get across. There's many different concepts that we can talk about, but alhamdulillah, on the counter side to that is, yes, you're right. There are some coins that are not regulated, but there are some coins now that are regulated. There is even a concept, like Brother Shraq was mentioning, of the USDT that has that concept of being more evolved with the central banks. Now, of my personal opinion, do I support that or not? That's a different discussion. But I would say that there is definitely a need to move in a direction where it allows certain countries and certain peoples to not necessarily be pegged to a certain government. The second thing I'll say is, if you understand the American dollar and how dollars work, essentially, like Maulana said perfectly, it's a piece of paper that is backed by a reserve of gold, and it's backed by a percentage. So really, along with other concepts that are more complex, the reality is that the dollar itself is held in value on how much we all believe in the dollar. If tomorrow everyone just stopped believing in the dollar and under certain concepts, that value of the dollar would go down, and that does happen under the forex market. And there's also fatwas on the forex market because of that volatility. But it's the same concept that could be argued. But again, that's my opinion, and it's definitely a good point that a lot of people do share. I know Brother here had a question as well. So before I get to your question, I just want to ask Brother Shraq if you wanted to also add on to that. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, question to Isha regarding the cryptocurrency. If that is so, America has imposed sanctions on so many countries, especially like Russia. The Russia can get into that cryptocurrency and just circumvent the sanctions totally, but that's not happening. Why?
I'm not an expert on foreign policy, so I can't answer that question. The question is, can cryptocurrencies be used to basically get around sanctions? And I have my thoughts on that, but I don't know if I can share them because they're not mature yet. So inshallah, I'm going to let other people answer that.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear Brother Adnan's opinion, but just to add to that, as someone in the regulation space, yes, it does happen. It does happen. And also, in some cases, it's also controlled now. For example, very recently, some major NFT brands have actually banned many brothers from Iran from using the platform to trade NFTs. So yes, just to put it in terms of facts, yeah, countries do use it to evade sanctions, but also there is a movement to start to regulate it happening as well in a lot of spaces.
Honestly, it's like Maulana said. There's no hard and fast rule per se that you can follow. You have to put it in a framework of the underlying, principles. Like he mentioned Zulm, he meant lots of other things, right? So any type of exchange of money in any history period that you pick out has been susceptible to cheating, has been susceptible to fraud. There's no reason why in the Bitcoin and crypto world that's not going to happen. If you go look at the articles and the headlines from the last 2 weeks, there's actually quite a few headlines just in the last 2 weeks about how some of that is being utilized under the current events in the world to transfer the money by some people. Yes. So any system is going to have its fallbacks. Any system is going to have its issues. It's like preventing theft at your house, right? There are different levels of grades of security you can have, but you can never totally protect it. So I think blockchain is just another measure of bringing a lot more security. But are there going to be actors that are going to find nefarious uses of that? Of course there will be, and there have been.
Yes, brother.
I believe that with taxes, you just, it's based on good faith, so you report how much you
Sorry, that was hard to hear. Can you just repeat it a little louder? Okay, so the question for everyone is, do we have to pay taxes on crypto? If not, when do you have to pay? I'll pass the mic to actually Brother Adnan, but from a regulatory perspective, yes and no. There are avenues now actively working to tax crypto, especially in a lot of states and a lot of countries. Is that practical or implementable? No, not in all situations. In fact, most cryptocurrencies, and remember, there's many different ways to make money off of the blockchain. That's one thing that I want to get out there. There's mining, there's trading, there's auditing, there's creating smart contracts. So some of these areas, can be taxed, for example, and theoretically, if you're trading crypto, now in a lot of places, it's treated as trading any other equity on the market. But in terms of other avenues of blockchain, it's not taxed. And it's not because it's not taxed from a government perspective because it's hidden. One is partially because the regulations are not developed yet, or second, it's not practical. If you look at a DOA, it was created to be decentralized. So how to tax it is something that moves completely away from the current SWIFT system, which is built on one system of banks talking to each other. The decentralized market is about the complete counter opposite of that. So I'll pass the mic to Brother Adnan to hear his opinion.
So before Brother Adnan, he answers, what happened is yesterday we got an email, and one of the brother, he said that I have some bitcoins as a homes, or do you accept? I said, yes, why not? So then I said, you want to have a receipt? I said, of course, because my Bitcoin is in Coinbase, and Coinbase I have to report. That's why I want to pay homes. That's just yes, go ahead.
I mean, look, we're talking about two different things here, right? One is the transfer of the money, and the other one is when you liquidate. What is the tax on it? So as far as transfer or transaction itself, flow of the money, okay, blockchain is a way to track the transfer that's happening from one point to the other. But if you own Bitcoin and you're selling it, I'm sure the IRS is going to come after people and say, hey, you bought an asset, doesn't matter what form it was, and you sold it and there was a capital gains. Perhaps that's the reason, Ishaq, you can tell me, why a lot of the new cryptocurrency guys are not based, are based in many different geographies. So in my opinion, I think it is taxed, and as Maulana confirmed, yes, Coinbase will report it because it's a digital asset. It's just a different form of asset. It's no different than having real property. It's just something you got and you made a gain on it. So there's gain that the government wants their slice of.
So yes, brother. Any sisters have a question? Please go ahead. If you can, mic here, please. We have to wrap it up in 5 minutes because the other program is started for the youth program. That's why. Please go ahead, sister.
Okay, so our first question is what if your private key gets stolen? So, is there a way to secure it? Is there a way to secure your assets that you have? Or, I think it's mainly Brother Ishaq.
So yes, there is. So there's many different technologies you can buy, such as a wallet or secure wallet that you can use to secure your coins. But the biggest problem is always going to be people. In fact, I don't know if you heard about Quadriga, where it was almost a multi-million-dollar company where the owner died and didn't share the password with anyone, so all the coins were lost. And this is the point to what Maulana was saying and Brother Adnan was saying, is that there is still a relatively new market, and there is these items that are not controlled. But my best advice, to keep it short, is there's absolutely technology out there. The same principles apply from a security and privacy perspective. You shouldn't be sharing your password. But at the end of the day, you have to be careful, because if you are not yourself secure and you're not, saving the right passwords, you can lose all your coins. And there's been many cases of people losing wallets or getting hacked by kids because their password's on the wall and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, I love SABA. So, things like that happen. And also, I don't know if you guys got the hint, Maulana made a point, everyone who trades crypto has to pay khums in Bitcoin.
Okay, so the other question is, so it's a decentralized system, but what if someone hacks into, say, some servers? Like, how do these servers talk to each other, and which one is like the most up to date and not hacked? Like, how do they know? Like, there should be some algorithm governing that, right?
Yeah, so the question is a little more technical, I believe, and the question is like, which one of these platforms is a lot more secure and less vulnerable to hacks? Is that the question?
Yeah, so I guess they are still vulnerable to hacking, right? Even though they are decentralized.
Yeah.
So how do these, like, is there a way to tag them that if this server was hacked, so like this other server can talk to this server to give that, like, suppose someone just like erases like millions of transactions or something, right?
Right. Yeah. So. There's different components to blockchain. When you talk about blockchain and essentially like Web3, there's different components, right? When you say servers, there's no like concept of servers in the blockchain world. If you look at the base layer, right? It's just like it's essentially a big, a good analogy would be linked list. It's just like a long linked list, which essentially there's a node that points to another node and that points to another node, and it keeps track of the entire history like that, right? The only way that you can actually attack the entire blockchain, especially when it comes to bigger ones like Bitcoin or Ethereum, is like I mentioned, if you have access to majority of the funds. So like if you actually control majority of Bitcoin, or if you control majority of Ethereum, then there's this thing called 51% attack, right? Where essentially like you keep on adding fake blocks or invalid blocks, and because you have the majority of the assets, you can actually do that and get away with it. But so far, from the entire history of Bitcoin, that has never happened. There's been never attack. Usually, when you hear stories of hacks or attacks, it's not on the protocol level, right? Like it's not like Bitcoin itself was hacked or that Ethereum itself was hacked. It's usually services that are communicating around that, right? So, for example, I might have a company that like stores a bunch of Bitcoin, right? I might be an exchange like Mount Gox, right? And so the way that hacks take place is that I have a bunch of private keys in my servers, and some attacker might come and talk to one of my employees into giving access to the servers, and then that person might have access to all the private keys, and that's what hack essentially means. Or another thing is like phishing attacks, right? Let's say that you go to a website that looks like a legit website, but it's really not, right? And then you might start interacting with the website with your private key, but you don't know that the website is taking your private key and then like extracting all your funds away. But all of that doesn't happen on the protocol level. It's like socially engineered, and it's these services that talk to the blockchain that gets hacked. So when you're talking about hacking blockchain, you're not really talking about on the protocol level. You're talking about on a much higher level with these services that talk to the protocol at the end of the day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So I had one last question. I think this is more related to data governance. So like who owns the data? Like, a lot of people like sell NFTs and stuff. Suppose I write a tweet. Is that like, that's a content created by me, but does Twitter own it? Do I own it? Or like, and how do people sell those like as NFTs? Like who, I guess it's more related to data governance and who owns all this data?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Who owns the NFT, specifically data, right? Yeah. Or data on the blockchain? And the answer is, it depends, right? Like if you're talking about data such as like the record that exists on the blockchain, then nobody actually owns it. Every node actually has a copy of all the history of transactions for that given blockchain, right? And anyone can become a node provider for Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? And so essentially nobody actually owns data. Like it doesn't live in somebody's servers like the way that AWS works. As far as NFTs is concerned, the way that ownership works for NFTs is that in the smart contract itself, there's a snippet of code that says that this specific data belongs to this address. And as long as you have access to that address, that's how you actually prove the ownership of that piece of data. But that data is actually like out about. It's like exposed. Anyone can access the data. But the only person that can manipulate the data is the person that is the owner of that specific data as dictated by the smart contract. And then the only way that you can actually manipulate it is if you prove that you have access to these, to this address, if you will. I don't know if that answers your question.
So yes, brother. It's going to be, inshallah, last question. I know that the other program has been started. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I guess to describe the situation we are at to determine which transaction or which action is halal or haram or mubah, we have two sets of scholars or knowledgeable people. One are those who know the hadith about gambling or riba, and those who know the transactions, as complicated as they are, like those who are doing with the smart contracts or the cryptocurrency transactions. So I guess the approach that so far we have taken is those who are knowledgeable about Bitcoin, about the general cryptocurrency transactions, approach to those ulama al-hadith, and they educate those folks what exactly we are talking about, and they go refer to those principles as you alluded to determine, extract basically the duty that we have based on the ahadith that generally we have about riba, and actually not the even riba, it's about actually the gambling. So I see a disparity between the volume of knowledge that is transferring from that side to this side, and then we are asking from a few ahadith to extract what we have to do about all this volume of things. I guess it should be the other way around. Those who know what exactly cryptocurrency is, they need to get educated about what gambling is and what gambling is not, and what riba is and what riba is not, which is not that much difficult concepts to educate educate themselves. And then those are those who can determine if it is halal or haram, not the other way around, because the volume of knowledge on one side is order of magnitude more than the volume of knowledge of educate somebody in understanding what riba is and what gambling is. So I think it's not that much a good approach to ask ulama if option is halal or haram, or what kind of transaction is halal or haram. And as you see, we see is this sort of discrepancy among different fatwas. It's actually ulama in this case are not those who know hadith. Actually, the ulama in this case are those who know cryptocurrency. And we need to know like a couple of hours of education about what gambling is. And then we, ulama, should refer to the second set of ulama and educate themselves if it is halal or haram.
Thank you, brother. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Please recite salawats. Beautiful point. We have, there was a tradition among the our qadama, those who used to live, mashallah, 50 years back and so on and so forth. Before they became a business oriented people or bazari, they used to go and they used to learn makasib. Makasib is part of their tradings and part of their education. So once they learn about the principles of Islam, about gambling, about dhulm, about other things, they can apply in their day-to-day activities and business better. You're absolutely right. Inshallah, it's better that if we can have these types of discussions with the know-how people, those who have a good amount of information and technology information about Web3 or crypto, if they learn about Islamic principles, they can do better job, inshallah. That's a great point. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us, inshallah, brothers and sisters. The nights of Qadr is approaching, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and bless all the Muslim ummah, all the ni'mat and rahmat. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.